So we're on the sheet that you have before you in your sutra book called Requesting Dharma. So we're on the invocation before the Dharma lecture. So repeat after me. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Perfectly enlightened one. Namo Sadando Suchedoye Alahadi Samya Samputoche. Together. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. Okay, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Venerable Masters, all Dharma Masters, and good and wise friends, Amitofo. Welcome to tonight's Sutra lecture. Today is August 23rd, 2014. We're here in Berkeley Buddhist Monastery in California, and we're about to start the Sutra lecture on the Avatamsaka Sutra, also known as the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of Great Expanded Teachings. So what we usually do is we start by reciting the text, the title of the text. In a way, it's a way to invoke, you could say, the spiritual presence of the Avatamsaka assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So if you could join me, it's a very simple chant. And we'll chant the title in Chinese 7 times. So you'll see it on the front of your book called Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pusa. So do that 7 times. Okay, so if I could invite everyone to open their sutra text to page 6 and page 7. Page 6 and page 7. So where we left off last week was on the top of page 6 and page 7. So from the previous sutra lecture, Reverend Heng Sure had finished page 4 and 5, talking about the praises of the gods, especially on the 6 paramitas. And now we're into the section pretty soon about how to enter this particular stage of the Bodhisattva path. So people who are here for the first time at the Avatamsaka Sutra lecture, this sutra is actually a very important, a very essential Mahayana Buddhist text. For many, they focus on studying this particular sutra, this particular portion of the sutra, because it really encapsulates the Bodhisattva's path to become a Buddha. In the 10 Grounds chapter, it really emphasizes the 6 paramitas. That people who are familiar with Buddhism, there are practices that allow one to, you could say, perfect one's humanity, perfect one's awakened nature, and that's what the paramitas are. Translated into English, they're called the perfections, also translated as the other shore, meaning that you go from the shore of suffering, of where we are in samsara, in suffering, and we get to the shore of nirvana, the shore where there is no suffering, where we're completely free. And so the 6 paramitas are very critical for the Bodhisattva's cultivation. And here we're on the 6th ground. So people know the 6 paramitas. The first one is that of giving, being able to renounce what is hard to renounce. So basically letting go. Oftentimes at the first stage of the spiritual path is letting go of the things that are actually causing us affliction, causing us problems. For instance, addictions, possessions, unhealthy relationships, various things that actually cause us suffering. We let it go. And the Bodhisattva, and more than that, is actually able to give up things that people think are very precious, even up to his own body. He's able to give that away. The second one is that of precepts. Precepts we are sometimes explained as a kind of ethical discipline. It's a way that we conduct ourselves in our daily life. It's a way that we treat other people, the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat the world. And so basically in Buddhism, after we give, the next step is to live a kind of an ethical, disciplined life. And that becomes the foundation for the spiritual practice. So that's also very important. So the Bodhisattva in the 10 grounds is on the path of perfecting all of these paramitas. Okay. So the third paramita is that of patience. And patience is, I think as everybody knows, very important. If anybody has had in any difficult relationships with friends, family, spouse, children, parents, patience is one of those magical medicines that solves almost every problem that you can imagine. If you can just be patient, things just pass, and your heart is kind of cooler. You didn't start an argument, you didn't start a fight, and so patience is a very wonderful medicine. And there's a poem that Master Hua gave, which was, patience is a precious pearl that few know how to mine. If you know how to use it well, everything will turn out fine. That's the poem. So it's really one of those dharmas that if you can practice the patience, with patience, things just kind of work out. They say that real blessings is being able to be patient. So the Bodhisattva is able to be patient in all circumstances. And it's not just the patience of, kind of clenching your fist and kind of holding it in. It's a patience where you don't even let your mind move. You don't even let your mind move to the point of being a little bit annoyed. So by not doing that, your patience is constant. You actually never lose your temper because your patience is at a place where your mind doesn't move at all. You don't even get frustrated. That's real patience. That's real patience. In Buddhism, real patience is almost like a strength in your mind to be able to stay on your practice, to stay mindful and heedful of your mind, and not let it get moved by the external situation. If you could do that, you're patient. So it's strong. In Buddhism, sometimes people think that Buddhism is kind of passive and weak. In fact, you have to be fairly strong to be really patient. You actually have to be watching your mind inside to make sure that you don't move. That's number 3. Number 4 is, does anybody know? Number 4? Vigor, yeah, that's right, vigor. Vigor, sometimes translated as energy, virya. It's like strength. It's basically when you do something, you do it with energy. It's not you do it with a kind of, I see a lot of high school kids, kind of like, I gotta go do this, I gotta do that. And that's how the opposite of vigor. And it's a kind of, I always feel like it's a really depressing life. You just kind of go through life just kind of floating through with a kind of mumbling, slumping over kind of. I see that because I just came from the city of 10,000 Buddhas. We have high school kids there. And I always look at them, gosh, you're like 16 years old, you should be more vigorous. I mean, life is so bright and you got so much energy. Use it. Cultivate that in your heart. And I think if you do that, you'll find that life becomes a lot more meaningful. Sometimes we just sink into a kind of a depressive mood because we don't have a vigor in our heart to just apply our energy on what we see is before us. And in Buddhism, we try to apply our energy on what's wholesome. People can be vigorous in negative dharmas, like just going out and trying to get all the benefit for ourselves, competing to be number one. That'd be vigor used, in a way that maybe is not so skillful. But for the Bodhisattva, he applies his vigor on these paramitas. How to give, how to hold the precepts, how to be patient. He does that with vigor. Okay, number 5, do people know? Not quite yet. Samadhi, yeah, number 5. We just did that one. Number 5 was that of samadhi. Samadhi is a Sanskrit word for concentration. Sometimes considered, in America, in the West, we often think about meditation, and that's very much connected with concentration and focus. So if we can focus our minds, not let it get scattered, I think that's probably the biggest modern problem, modern ailment, is a kind of scattered mind. I have that problem. It's get on the computer and everything flashes in front of you and your mind's already got 8 browser windows open and you don't know what happened to your mind. And so that's one of the, I could say, very important practices in Buddhism, because if you don't have a focus, you're unable to concentrate, you can never go deep. You're always just on the top, the surface, the superficial layer of life. And so focus lets you penetrate. And so if you live a ethical life, you're able to be patient with situations, you have a kind of open and generous heart, you have energy, you can apply yourself with energy, and then you focus, then you can go deep. You can see things as they are. You don't just see the superficial layer of things. Practically speaking, you understand people better. People say something and you just don't hear the words they say. You can see past their words to their actual feelings and thoughts and experience underneath, because you're in tune with your... Am I kind of loud? Alan? Can you turn down a little bit? I think there's a little bit of a... So it allows you to go kind of deep, because ourselves, we kind of have went inside and able to tap into something inside. So that's number 5. And number 6 is where we're on now, the 6th ground of the Bodhisattva. And that's what was just said was wisdom. Prajna wisdom is what the 6th ground is. And this is when the Bodhisattva sees things as they are and uses the wisdom of the Dharma to understand the nature of reality. So in Buddhism, there's very quickly 3 aspects to this. You say prajna have 3 aspects of wisdom. The first is literary wisdom. Literary wisdom is what we're doing right now. It's from studying. So we go and you study the Dharma. And from there we gain a certain amount of wisdom. And it's somewhat intellectual. The second is contemplative wisdom. And that is when we actually take the text after we study it and we reflect on it. We meditate on it. We apply it in our daily lives. And that develops, you could say, a deeper understanding of the text. And then the third layer, the third level is, you call it actual prajna wisdom. Literally translated as true mark prajna. Is when you see things as they truly are. And so we'll start seeing the Bodhisattva here doing some of those things. And so here we're now on this particular ground, which is the 6th ground Bodhisattva, and he's now practicing prajna wisdom. So that just gives people a context. They're here for the first time. That we're now on this Bodhisattva path, on the 6th ground, the ground of wisdom. And I have to say, the prajna section, prajna wisdom, is oftentimes fairly hard to understand. And the reason is because it's trying to point to a place in our experience that's non-dual. Non-dual meaning it's not based on this is white, this is black, this is right, this is wrong, this is, what do you say? You know, this is this person here, this is me over here. There's no duality. What it's trying to point to is a place where things are whole, complete, not split up, discriminated. And so for us, we're mostly just using that discriminating mind throughout our lives, and we try to use our discriminating mind to understand the sutra text, it sometimes makes our discriminating mind very frustrated or confused. And so, so the experience of oftentimes reading the prajna text is one of frustration, one of not understanding what's going on. But in fact, what happens is when we slowly study them more and more, we find that they actually make more and more sense over time, mostly because our own delusions and confusions fall away. So what we see is rather than looking at the text and going, this is hard to understand, when we start looking at our own minds and go, why is my mind confused and unable to understand what is being spoken here? Because this is spoken from someone with great wisdom and great teachers, great monastics and practitioners have pointed to this text as being fundamental for one's spiritual growth. So, I say, we want to be patient with ourselves, patient with the texts, and bit by bit, we'll all study this text together and hopefully understand it a little bit more deeply tonight. So just to start, if I can invite everyone to put your palms together, we'll start on the top of page 6 and then page 7. So we'll read the verse on page 6, followed by the verse on page 7, and then we'll read a paragraph of the next paragraph, and then the following paragraph on the English side. So if people can put your palms together. So people who do not know Chinese, there's romanization below. You can just try to follow along and practice your Chinese. We'll just try our best. Okay. Okay, it says, 如是妙音千万种，是妙音千万种，赞以默然赞扬佛，解脱越狱金刚藏，以何性相入后地。Okay, the English, page 7. These marvelous words of praise, 10 million-fold in number. Ring out and then fell silent as all those present gazed up at the Buddha. Moon of liberation then said to treasury of Vajra, what are the characteristics, practices of somebody who masters the next stage? Okay, and we'll read the Chinese on the next page, on page 6 again. Okay. 尔是金刚藏菩萨告解脱乐菩萨言。佛子菩萨摩诃萨，
已具足第五地，欲入第六现前地。当观察十平等法，何等为十？何等为十？所谓一切法相，故平等。无体故平等，无生故平等，无尘故平等，本来清净故平等，无戏论故平等，无取舍故平等，极尽故平等。如幻如梦如影如想，如水中月如镜中像，如焰如化故平等，有无不二故平等。
So now the English. Then Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva said to Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva, disciples of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva who has already mastered the fifth stage, and who wishes to approach the sixth stage called manifestation, should contemplate 10 ways that dharmas are all the same. What are these 10 ways? They are: all dharmas are the same in having no hallmarks, the same in having no substance, the same in having no creation, the same in having no destruction, the same in being fundamentally pure, the same in not being a matter for conjecture, the same in being neither grasped nor dropped, the same in being still and quiet, the same in being like illusions, like dreams, like reflections, like echoes, like the moon's reflection in water, like images in a mirror, like mirages and like transformations. And the same in their existence and non-existence, being not two. Okay, so we finished the sutra text. I'll briefly start, and then Dharma Master Jing Wu will speak next. Just to quickly introduce Dharma Master Jing Wu, he has actually, his name is very appropriate for this section because the character in his name comes up about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 times. 7 times in this particular sutra text. And so all the times it says Wu, that's actually his name. All the time it says no, that's his name. No, nothing. And so it's appropriate for him to come down and speak on this particular section. Just to quickly introduce him, he actually came from Taiwan to enter the monastic training at the 7,000 Buddhas. He actually was very active in the monastery in Taiwan and has a family there with 3 kids. And he said his family is very strange. They all kind of encourage each other to leave home. And so he said he got here. He was the first in his family to do so, though. He says all of them were transferring merit so that he could succeed. All the other 4 of his family members. And so he actually left home at the same time I did. We left home together, so we have quite an affinity. And we also took the full Bhikshu precepts together. So all my time training in the monastery, Jing Wu was just right in front of me pretty much for quite a period of time, right next to me, or a couple people next to me. And I have to say I learned a lot because growing up here in Silicon Valley, I never learned how to sew or how to iron anything or how to wash my clothes by hand. I still really don't know how to do that. So Jing Wu would often kind of show me how to do stuff, all the kind of essential things of life, rather than how to use a computer. So I'm very grateful that he was in the monastery at the same time, because he was very patiently trying to teach me these very things that you probably learn when you're like 5 years old. So I'm learning it when I'm probably 30. So tonight, it's very happy to have him be able to come down and share some of his insights on this particular passage. But before that, just to go over every passage of the sutra text, I'll just quickly go over the first verse on this page, which I don't think takes too much to explain because I think it's very straightforward. And we've actually been on this section for quite a while, but I just want to highlight the main things that are happening. Namely, where we are in the sutra text is in the sixth ground. We're in the very beginning of the introduction of the sixth ground. So each ground begins with some praises. And here the devas, or the gods, come and make praises. And so this is the last verse of the praise. So it says, these marvelous words of praise, 10 million-fold in number, rang out and then fell silent, as all those who present gazed up at the Buddha. So I think if we can imagine that, before we have all these modern technology, before we have all these images and movies, right? Probably words had a lot of power to them. And in the past, as the monastics or lay disciples would recite this, my guess was they could actually call forth a kind of imaginary image of what's going on. So if you can imagine what happens, these gods are praising, and all of a sudden, all of them become quiet. And they look expectantly at the Buddha, just asking, what's the Dharma going to be like? What's going to happen next? They have this wish to learn. And so here, I think as ourselves, we can also have that heart of wanting to learn. Because that's how the Dharma goes deep in our hearts, is if we first cultivate that heart of wanting to learn. Once we have that, then we could absorb it. If our heart is kind of cold or a little bit prideful, kind of like, I don't know if this is going to make any sense to me, I don't know if this is really worth studying, then we kind of shut down that gate and we can't absorb it. So here the gods are opening their hearts to the Dharma. So then Moon of Liberation, which is one of the Bodhisattvas, the Bodhisattva who is actually making the request for the Dharma, said to Treasury of Vajra. So Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva is the speaker of this text. And he asks him, what are the characteristic practices of somebody who masters the next stage? So basically that's his question. That's the Dharma request. We just did a Dharma request here before, asking the Sangha to teach how to leave suffering and attain happiness and bliss. Here is Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva asking something similar, which is, how do we practice so that we can get to the next stage, to master the next stage? So here is Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva going to reply in the next section. Okay, so that's the stage. And I was going to ask Jing Wu to speak on this section coming up. So we're now on the Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva said to Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva.
诸佛菩萨，上人慈悲，各位法师慈悲，各位善知识慈悲，让净无有这个机会来这边向各位一块学习《华严经》这个第六地。首先自我介绍一下，我来自台湾台北。多年前呢，跟各位一样，有个美满的家庭，有3个小孩。 3个都女孩。然后这个出家本身在我们家来讲，它是一种口号，是逢年过节的时候喊一喊，希望小孩子赶快出家，因为小孩都大了嘛，希望他们出家。结果他们也希望我们出家。然后他们3个女人加我，应该叫孤儿，现在变成4个女人，把我排挤掉了。4个人都回向给我，所以我出家了。我在09年受完菩萨戒以后，产生了2个矛盾。这边有没有受过菩萨戒的？可以举手看看，好吧
？How many have taken the Bodhisattva precepts?
你们程度都很高哦。我学完菩萨戒以后有2个障碍，第一个学不懂，第二个学不完。
Okay. All Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, Dharma Master, and all good friends. I'm very happy to be here tonight and to be able to study the Avatamsaka Sutra with everybody. Just to introduce myself briefly, I came from Taiwan, Taipei, and like everyone here, most likely they have a family. I had a family in Taiwan, and I actually had 3 girls. And so my family, there was 4 women and myself. And this idea of becoming a monastic or leaving home, going forth into the monastic order, it was something that we kind of all just kept on we kind of talked about. No one really did anything. We just kind of spoke about it. And maybe on the Chinese New Year, we would say, everybody, yeah, we want you to leave home. Hope the kids would leave home sooner because they're all growing up. So hopefully they would become monastics. And so all 4 of them actually transferred for me to leave home. So that transferred merit for me to leave home. So, and I was able to leave home. In 2009, I came to the city of 10,000 Buddhas to take the Bodhisattva precepts. And at that time, I took them and I felt a kind of internal conflict. Why? Because I thought to myself, wow, I don't really understand these precepts that well, and I don't think I have enough time to finish studying it.
学不懂，如那个恨元品里面讲的，如莲花不着水，如日月不足空。
So there's a phrase in the Avatamsaka Sutra that says, the lotus flower doesn't get soaked by the water. The water doesn't stay on the lotus flower. It just kind of rolls right off. And the sun and moon don't stay still in the sky. They just go right through the sky.
我们净传师是老师，请问一下这个怎么解释？英文组的。
Yes, he wants to test me. Say, okay, so have me explain this one. 你要我讲吗？ Okay. 如果我讲错，你可以纠正。So outside, if I say anything wrong, he can correct me. If I were to explain that passage, I would think that you'd have the lotus flower being what we are as cultivators, and whatever falls on us just kind of rolls right off. It doesn't stick to us. So the defilements of the world, the dust of the world, the afflictions of the world, they just roll right off of us. It doesn't stick with us. And like the sun and the moon in the sky, I think it's also similar. It's just free. It just goes right through the sky and doesn't leave a trace behind. It just goes very, very naturally, very, very smoothly, right through space. Because I don't know if Jing Wu Shi understood my English, so maybe he can't really correct me.
中文解释一下吧。
中文解释，我是说，就是说，那个花如果水不到上面，就像我们一样，不会成烦恼，然后留在我们心中。然后如果像太阳啊，也是一样，他们在虚空当中不会留一个什么那个 trace 一个留下来的东西，就很自然的、很自由的，可以在天空当中移动。
这讲了无，然后也讲了中道，它是一种追求跟放下。例如各位，现在你们放下你们世间的五欲的享受， 而来这边追求我们下半生的离苦得乐的，然后再过来，我们希望往生到净土，往生到乃至成佛这个佛果。
So these two principles talk about the middle way as well as emptiness, and so everyone here is, you could say, put down the 5 desires. You let go of the 5 desires to come here and seek the Dharma, to learn the Dharma principles, and to be able to study something that will bring true happiness and be able to leave suffering behind. And then ultimately we'll be able to be born in the Pure Land and also realize Buddhahood.
如果放下多一点，就跟我们2位一样出家吧。如果追求多一点，那就是相对的，你要在6道里面继续轮回。所以放下跟追求是一个很难取舍的，大家要努力学习的东西。所以我说学不懂就在这边。
So if you can put down the things of the world some more, then you're able to maybe become a monastic, like we both here became monastics. You can enter that path. Or if you can't let go of the things of the world and you want to continue on with those, then you end up continuing on the cycle of transmigration, the cycle of death and rebirth. It just goes on and on. And so here, that's the principle of letting go and also seeking. So one seeks the worldly things, it just continues on and on. So this was the thing when I was studying the precepts, I couldn't understand.
然后第二个学不完，84000个法门怎么学？你到底是要决定要找一个跟你相契的法门，要从那个相契的法门中入手，一门通就门门通。
So the other was I couldn't finish studying. I couldn't finish studying the Dharma because there's 84,000 Dharma doors, all these various methods of practice, and how do I find one that I have an affinity with? In the Dharma, we say that we should find one method that we have an affinity with and deeply enter that method. And once we completely master one method, all the other methods basically we master all the rest as well. From one, we realize all of them.
所以第2年10年我就出家了，到目前，也希望各位多多发心，看不懂学不懂就赶快找个或到圣城出家吧。
So he says, so if you, so in 2010, then he decided to become a monastic, so you can let go and learn more. And so if people can't want to try the same thing, you can also become monastics at the 6,000 Buddhas. Don't go too fast though. Take it step by step.
我们需要消文吗？大概练一下。我们大概把文消一消吧。这时候，是金刚藏菩萨告解脱月菩萨言：“佛子，菩萨摩诃萨具足第5地。他所谓的具足，就是善根跟福德，统统把第5地修行到圆满的第5地蓝生定修行到非常圆满的境界。他准备要进入第6地现前地的时候，要先观察这10种平等的法门，他才能按照顺序渐进，然后才能进入到第6地。”
So here the sutra text talks about Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva explaining the Dharma to Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva. And basically he says that a Bodhisattva who has mastered the 5th stage, what does he master? Well, he has, you could say, accumulated or perfected or gathered all the good roots and blessings required for the 5th stage, and now is about to enter the 6th stage. And here he says 10 ways of contemplating everything as the same. Also here in Chinese literally is pingdeng, which is equanimity, is a kind of level and equal. And so here, by contemplating these 10 things, the Bodhisattva can very smoothly enter into the sixth ground, the sixth stage.
所谓的法，一切法无相平等故，因为它的法本身就没有形状的，四法都是平等的，没有高下，所以它是平等的。第二个，法没有志向，也没有体，所以都也是平等的。然后讲到这边无，先解释，先翻译一下吧。
So here it says all dharmas are the same and having no hallmarks. So essentially all the dharmas here sometimes translated as phenomena. So all the phenomena of the world have no hallmarks. Sometimes we also translate hallmarks as attributes or characteristics. So they don't have any characteristics. They also don't have any substance. So this word that is used to describe these dharmas, the word no, Wu, is actually his name. So he can explain the character Wu.
这边有没有会讲广东话的？无广东话怎么翻译？怎么讲？魔。下次看到我不能叫魔法师啊，没有了，所以只能叫静无就好了。
So this is mo. Mo is the how you say it in Cantonese. The word for Wu is mo in Cantonese. So if you call him Dharma Master Mo, then it kind of means you're not here. You're not here. So you can't use that. You have to use the word Jing Wu. Jing Wu Shi.
这个无字在梵语里面，它连它是一种意思，它非有存在的。可是佛教按照一些相对来讲，既然有无，既然是偏无有，就是偏无就偏有。
Okay, so the character Wu is actually translating the Sanskrit. And the Sanskrit is actually just has the character in front. So if you know Sanskrit, which I'm guessing probably most people don't know, but if you add an in front of the word, like for instance, Tathagata, the gata is go or come. I think gata is come, and agata is not come, which means gone. So that's the word Tathagata, which can mean thus come one or thus gone one, depending on how you read the word. So that's the word in Sanskrit. The word is which is the Wu. And so in Buddhism, we have the idea of non-existence and existence, and also partially existent, partially non-existent.
它唯有超有这个无之相对性，才能成为绝对的真如。超越这个相对论，超无的相对论。
Okay, so if you can transcend duality, then you can actually really understand things as they are. Literally translated as true suchness. So if you can transcend this duality of, existence, non-existence, then you can see things as they really are.
大智入论里面说得很清楚，他说你要超越这个相对的性质有跟无。原是灭绝诸法之假实的现象，以无为一切皆空的意语，就是说诸法都是空的，空无自性。
你用白话讲，
就诸法都是空的，空无自性。
Okay, so in the treatise on great wisdom, it talks about how all the dharmas are empty, and by using that method, you can cultivate.
然后既然是无的话，所以说我们讲了这个法没有生，它也不会灭，也是无生无灭的，所以是平等的。
So we talk about the dharmas not being created and not being destroyed, so they're also equal and level.
法没有所谓的成，也没有所谓的坏，所以它也是平等的。下面会对着平等稍微跟各位再报告一下。
So they also don't come into being or become destroyed. So they're all also equal and level. So this word, or they're the same. So this word of equal and level or the same, 平等, he'll give a little bit of an explanation.
平等它也是从梵语里面翻过来的，它其实所有东西都是平齐等，没有高下，没有深浅之区别，指一切现象在共生或空性、无事性、心真如上 都没有差别，所以谓之为平等。
So this word pingdan also comes from Sanskrit, and basically it's being able to see things as non-dual. They're not high or low, true or false, black or white. You don't have all the dualities. So being able to transcend all these dualities, you can see things as the same, non-dual, pingdan.
在佛陀里面讲了，他要把这个4个性的种族打破，然后讲平等。里面最著名的应该算优婆离尊者，他本身出身是一个非常非常低贱的那个有时间再讲这个吧。低贱的那个种族，然后他很快证道悟入那个，大家有时间再跟各位报告这个公案，先讲一下别的。
So I'll save a story for everyone, but there's a story about how the Buddha actually, you could say, broke down the caste system. He didn't follow the caste system of India because of one of the great venerable monastics, I think Venerable Upali, who was actually a low caste, and the Buddha taught him. So I'll first talk about another subject, but I'll tell that story later.
以那个大智起心论里面讲，我们本来是一个真如法界里面平等的法界。
So in another sutra text, it talks about how in the true suchness Dharma realm, it's actually what actually it is actually a Dharma realm which is level and equal, is non-dual.
离除等待，没有人相，没有我相的对立。
There is no mark of purse people and no mark of dharmas. There is not that kind of duality. So you don't have the kind of categories of people and dharmas in your mind.
是一个整体的生命观。
So it's a complete way of seeing the entire world, the way that you can use to contemplate your entire life.
不幸的是，我们本性的真如不守自性，因为依恋的妄动，我们内心的深处一直向外开始去攀援了。
So it's too bad that we don't really stay with this true way of seeing things, but instead our mind starts making discriminations and then going out and seeking outside for things. So we go out and we, in Chinese, literally call climbing on conditions, meaning we go out and try to find happiness and you see all the things in the world to kind of fill us to get happiness from.
因为这个攀援的希望而产生了一种对立的思考，这个变成了不平等的思想，而产生了妄想的开始。
So because we have this seeking outside, we begin to start creating duality and analysis, trying to figure out how to get what we seek. And that brings out all of our thinking, causing us to have a lot of random thoughts, thinking left and right, and all the various afflictions arise.
在《楞严经》上讲，它是一种虚妄的想象。
So in the Shurangama Sutra, they say this is just a false reality we create, an illusion.
它里面最有名的一个比喻是，好像黑暗中看到一条绳子，我们以为它是蛇，产生了一种错误的判断。
So the most famous story of this is the story of the rope, and it's the ropes in a room, and it's all dark, and we go in the room and we see the rope. We mistakenly think that it's a snake, and so our minds is actually incorrect. We understand it incorrectly, so we think the piece of rope is a snake.
这是他心中的影像产生了妄想，就产生了烦恼。
So from our minds, we begin to have all these various discriminations and thoughts, and we end up having all these afflictions.
也好像我们跟魔甲的感情特别好，这个魔甲做任何事情，你都认为他是对的。
So another example would be, for instance, we have an affinity with somebody, we get along with somebody very well, and so whatever they do, we usually think, oh, that person's doing the right thing. That's good. You're doing the right thing.
同样的事情发生在谟语的身上，而你又认为他全部是不对，全部这个不行，那个不行。
So somebody you dislike, they could do exactly the same thing, and you think, oh, that's wrong.
因为不同的想法就是你心里面的虚妄的想象造成的。
So this comes from the mind's projections. We create all these, you could say, illusory fantasies or illusions in our mind. So this kind of discrimination comes from our mind.
因为这种变化，你变成了你对有可爱的东西追求，你不可爱的东西你会排斥它。
So these kind of things cause our mind to go up and down, move a lot. And so the things that we find cute and attractive, we start running after it. The things that we find disgusting, we basically reject and look down upon.
那时候我们就起烦恼了，开始起烦恼就开始造业。
So now we start having afflictions and problems and worries. And once we have afflictions and problems and worries, we start creating karma.
一般人很难去抗拒这种妄想，因为我们这个习惯性的。
But for most of us, it's really hard for us to change our karma and change our habits because they're so deep. They're deep habitual patterns.
你做完了第一个，决定有第二个出现，再来就第三个跟着来了，就变成自然的了。
So all these false thoughts, the first one comes, then the second one comes, and the third one comes. They all just flow on very naturally, kind of like you can't stop it.
所以《楞严经》上说，我们每个人心中有3种的相续力量。
So in the Shrangma Sutra, it says our mind has three different things.
第一个是烦恼相续，我们从无始劫中所有的烦恼一个接一个，从来没有断过。
So the first one is a continuation of our afflictions. Our afflictions just go on and on and on and never break.
烦恼相续完了就是业力相续，一个接一个。
So the next one is the power of our karma. The power of our karma, because the habitual tendencies just push us endlessly. So that's continually pushing us on.
再来就是果报相续，生死那个轮回不停，在我们生死大海中，一下为畜生，一下为人。
So the third one is a retribution, or the results of our karma just continue on and on. So, for instance, we are one day, one life as a human, another life as an animal, and it goes on and on and on.
造成这种妄想的那个原因，就是因为我们有这种不平等的思想去分别它。
So the reason we have all this false thinking is because we do not have a kind of level and equal mind to look at the world and what's going on. Our minds does not have equanimity.
各位要怎么办？
So everybody, what do we do?
靠愿力发愿。
So we have to rely on our vows. So we should all make vows.
台湾南部有个大同百货公司，我不知道你听过没有？
什么公司？
大同百货公司卖属于 market 的东西。
Oh, okay. So in Taiwan, in the southern Taiwan, there's a big, I guess, supermarket chain. Okay. Department store. A department store.
当那个老板还是个高中生的时候，他的父亲是给人家打零工的，他的母亲是帮人家洗衣服的。
So when he was in school, I think in high school, I think his parents were all blue-collared workers. His mom washed clothes, and his dad did some kind of labor work. Yeah, just did hard labor, I guess.
当他母亲要过生日的时候，他就去存了钱，要去给他母亲买一个镜子。
So when it was his mother's birthday, he tried to save up some money so he can buy a mirror for his mother.
当时台湾南部那边最大应该是大兴百货公司，他就去那边买镜子，穿得很寒酸，那个店员就开始很看不起他。
So in Taiwan, he went to this store, and so because he was very poor, so his clothing wasn't very nice, And so when he went in the store, the person, the worker there didn't really, you could say, disrespected him, looked down upon him.
当他去看镜子的时候，很不小心，差点把镜子打破，那个店员就推了他一把。
So he was looking at the mirror, and he almost couldn't hold it, and he almost dropped it and broke it. So then but then the worker behind him actually pushed him.
推了这一下，他心中里面产生了很大的激动。他为什么比人家穷？为什么我不能那个？开始发愿，然后这个力量在他心中产生了很大的力量。少睡少吃，多用功，多认真，去从小职员开始做起。
So he here in the at that time in his mind, he really had this strong resolve, saying, "Why am I poor? Why do I have so little? Why is this? This is not fair." And he made a resolve to really work hard. And so from there, he started really applying effort in all the things that he was doing.
没有几年，他在南部那边、高雄那边盖一尊12层楼的百货公司，当时是东南亚里面最大的一家。
So then, a number of years later, 12年前大的
12楼。
So he built a 12-story department store, one of the biggest department stores in Asia. It was 12 stories, and so that came from that resolve.
所以各位心中要有愿望，我们要愿断一切恶，愿修一切善，誓度一切众生。把这三个愿望放在你心中里面，作为你以后依行的目标。
So you want to make some really strong vows, and you can take the vows of the Bodhisattva, the vow to not do any evil, the vow to cultivate all good, the vow to rescue and help all beings. You have that in your heart and mind all the time, and then you go out into the world and you can apply those vows into all your various situations that you meet.
我相信各位都会成功的。
I'm sure all of you here will be very successful.
现在请各位把你的手伸出来借我一下。
So I would ask you to stick out your hand and I can borrow your hand.
我们这个食指伸出来。
So if you ever just our finger, our index finger.
我们经常用这个食指
，So we use our finger.
对不对？这个不对，那个不对。
That's not right. This is not right.
各位要学菩萨的精神，我们把它改过来，换大拇指。
So we need to change into the Bodhisattva's mind, and so you want to change into your thumb.
我们要赏识我们的小孩子的优点，赏识我们周遭人的优点。菩萨从我的身边开始做起。
So we want to be able to see the good points of our children, of our family members, of the people around us. If we see their good points and point those out, and then we slowly, bit by bit, cultivate the Bodhisattva path.
阿弥陀佛，讲到这边，因为剩下那个Jin-Chuan还有一点事要向各位报告。
Okay, so I'll just speak till here, and then and I will just give me some time to share some recent experiences. But you didn't tell your story. 你有没有讲你的故事？你应该讲你的故事。乌巴利的故事，乌巴利尊者。乌巴利尊者。下次讲，我不知道下一次什么时候。下次讲。你看好故事。时间够吗？够啊。你讲你故事。讲我的。Okay. So I'll say a little bit, and then he'll say his story. Well, I think people know I was actually not here for the last 2 weeks at Berkeley Monastery. And the reason was actually because we had in my mind, a very important event at the State 10,000 Buddhas. We actually had a Chinese language seminar, or literally a reading seminar on Buddhist texts, on Buddhist classical Chinese. And what happened was we had 25 students from all over coming to the State 10,000 Buddhas, and we spent 10 days actually just translating the sutra text, particularly translating the Nirvana Sutra. And why do I think it's very important? I don't know if people know the history of Buddhism when it came to China. People have heard the stories of Venerable Kumarajiva, Venerable Xuanzang Dasi, right? He came, and they all started these really large translation centers. Venerable Kumarajiva's translation center had thousands of people in it. He would speak on the Dharma, and then have all these people translating with him. Venerable Master Shrinzong had a smaller group. He actually hand-selected his translator. He picked the best cultivators of the time, and he gathered them all in the same place, and they worked on the translations together. And so in China, a lot of the translations that were brought from India to China were done from the work of many, many people, not just one person. It came, and also with oftentimes the blessings of the emperor. The emperor would fund the projects. And it was thought to have been great merit to be able to work on these translations and to be able to fund these translations. And so that's how the Dharma came to China, was through these translation centers that made the Dharma accessible in Chinese. So here in America, we have this text right in front of us, and we see English and we see Chinese. We open the text, and one page is Chinese, one page is English. And sometimes we look at the English, and it doesn't really make sense. We look at the Chinese, it just looks like various images on the page, and doesn't make sense either. And so, what do? Right? This is the process of the Dharma still coming over to English. And a lot of times, in particular early translations, the translations weren't that clear. People at that time really didn't have that much Chinese background, and they just oftentimes looked at the dictionary in Chinese and just plugged in word for word. I saw this character, so I put in this word. I see this character, I put in this word. They had Master Hua's commentary to guide them a little bit, but in general, it was a first crack at trying to translate. But Master Hua, as people know, made a vow to translate the Buddhist canon into all the languages of the world. And he said he's a really foolish person because he doesn't understand English. How can he make this kind of vow? But he hoped his disciples would carry it on. And so his early day disciples would actually do all this translation work, and they did the first cut. They did the first version. Master Hua said, "Don't worry, just do your best. People in the future will come and make corrections and improvements over the years." And so, as I kind of reflected over these years of studying the Dharma and being exposed to Buddhism, I actually seen many translations, not just in BTTS. You see, BTTS is the Buddhist Text Translation Society. That's the organization that's in part of the RBA that does the translation work. And so what I've seen in terms of translations is that oftentimes there's usually one translator, like a Buddhist scholar, and he would take the text and translate the text and add a lot of footnotes and explain why he chose certain terms. And it's usually very academic. It's one approach. And then we sometimes have some Buddhist groups that do translations, and they come out, and oftentimes they feel very sincere, but they feel like they're in Chinglish. They read it, and you're gonna go, if I understood Chinese, then I could understand what they're saying, but still it seems very foreign, not quite in English. And then we have some, you could say, Buddhist practitioners who are also scholars, like Bhikkhu Bodhi and a couple others like him, who have made it, like Dharma Master Heng Sure, who just came. I don't know if people saw him 2 weeks ago. He happened to come here for the lunchtime, called Kalavinka. So he's a very early disciple of Master Hua, and has done a lot of translation work. So there are certain people who have this kind of practicing background and also translating the text, which makes the text much richer, much more alive, because they're taking the text and putting it into practice, not just to make it an academic exercise. So these things are happening here in America as the Dharma comes west. But Master Hua actually laid down something that he thought was very important, was that translation should be done in groups. And he's established this process of a 4-committee process of having a primary translator, having a reviewer who reviews the text, having someone who polishes the text to make sure it's in English, and then someone who certifies the text to make sure it accords with the Dharma. So create all these various stages and wanted people to work together to translate the sutras. And if you hear the early stories of the early disciples, it was not easy for them all to work together. In fact, they were all trying to work together. At one point, they fought so badly that their fighting caused Venerable Master Shu Ying's picture on the wall to fall from the wall and crash to the floor and splinter. And True Factor tells the story. And she said at that point she started crying, and Master Hua came in the room, saw them, and said, "Okay, I'll give you all separate translations to work on." So he gave them all individual projects to work on because they couldn't all work together. And if people have worked on translations, and if you really care about it, you see that translation is actually very difficult. Why? It's because you're actually dealing with symbols in the mind and how we understand things. So when people try to get together and talk about how they actually think of things, it's usually very different. So it's very easy to get into kind of conflict and friction. It's just like one of those things that just I see happen over and over and over again with translation. So this time though, these 10 days at the St. Thomas Buddhist, I think was a very unique experiences because we had 25 people gathered together and basically learn how to translate in the spirit of, I believe, what Master Hua laid down for us, and also I think the best of what the academic world has developed in terms of studying and translating. So I think it is a combination of a lot of things. And so what happened was we had people of all ages. We had, I think, probably the youngest was something like maybe it's 14 years old. And we had probably some elders, or maybe about 60 years old. And we had monks, we had nuns, we had lay people, laymen, lay women. We had high school kids, we had probably even middle school kids, and parents. And everybody was sitting together, 25 of us, and we would all try to translate together. And how we did it was we'd all create our own individual translation. Then in the daytime, we would then go over together with one another as a group, entire group, and try to understand the sutra text. And then finally, we would gather in small groups and try to come up with a translation that we could all agree on. And actually, our groups were actually all fairly harmonious. Some of the groups commented, yeah, we're all too harmonious. So we basically had to make a scale where we had to say, okay, are you okay with this? So how okay are you with this? Are you okay with like a 5 okay? Are you okay with this 4 okay? Are you okay with this 3 okay? So they could actually get a decision from the group, because the groups are all very, very amiable. And maybe our second generation disciples are much less, a little less strong in their personalities. And so they were working together, and we'd come up with translations. But the group was very balanced because we had people who were graduate students, with PhDs or in graduate programs with Sanskrit, etc., and other people who had very strong Chinese. And just watching the whole group work day in, day out together as a team, I was really inspired, because I say this is probably going to be what in the West will be the new translation center. Probably we probably have to use computer less. I have to say the idea we all had our own computer screen, so we had to imagine the whole room, 25 people, all with a computer screen. I don't know, not people know, but the entire Buddhist Tripitaka in Chinese is accessible on your computer, on a CD. I think Reverend Heng Sure has showed that a number of times. So the first thing that happened was the instructors actually showed us how to use, this is called C-Beta, the Chinese Buddhist Electronic Tripitaka Association, last word? I think maybe it's that. So basically, the first thing they did was show us how to use this digital database of the entire Buddhist Tripitaka. And it was pretty amazing when they actually showed what you can do and what all was available there. Basically, the entire, what's on the wall behind us there, the 2 bookshelves completely full, the entire Tripitaka is there on a computer disk that you can search every single word. So you can actually just type in text, and you can find every single place that text appears in the Tripitaka. You can see the sutra text, you can see the commentaries that are given, you can see the different, redactions, the different time periods when there's different characters that were written in the text and how it changed. So it's a very impressive database. And so that's one of the tools we had, in addition to all the various dictionaries that are now available as well. And so basically we spent this last 10 days working as a group. And as an extra bonus, Dharma Master Chur, who is now in Australia, through the modern technology, actually would review our translations that we made. So she actually gave very detailed comments about how to improve our translations. And maybe we made a mistake, or we chose a word, she would give us some feedback about maybe why to use this word, not use this other word. Like for instance, my group, we chose at one point just to see what Chifasher, actually we kind of wanted to see what Chifasher how she would respond for the word Da Xian, which means often translated as great immortal. We translated it as great saint. And the reason we did that was because we thought, well, we wanted something that was more alive in the Western mind. And a saint was something that we relate to, rather that immortal, which is more of a Taoist concept. She thought, well, I don't know if you want to pick a saint, because usually that requires 3 miracles before you're considered a saint. So there's a lot of other words we can choose, like great mystic, great ascetic. Also sometimes just from the Sanskrit direct is Maharishi. So these are the kind of discussions we'd had throughout the 10 days. And my feeling by it was that, one was I saw this is probably the seed of Master Hua's vow coming to fruition, the beginning of it. But the other part was seeing a lot of the young people there. There was probably 5 or 6 young people from the age of 14 to 18. And their Chinese was all better than mine, and their English was probably also better than mine. Which was quite nice to see. And so I thought, wow, Dharma really has a lot of hope in the future with these kind of young people in the world. I didn't expect to find these kind of young people who actually had the Dharma somewhat alive in their hearts. You know, it wasn't just getting lost in the world's distractions. They were into the Dharma. So that was very inspiring. I had a couple pictures, but I don't know if I'll have time. I don't know if people want to see them. But basically, we had this for the last 10 days. And it was pretty fun. I think that was the other thing that was very nice, was everybody had a lot of fun trying to study and translate the sutra text. We were doing the Nirvana Sutra. If people know the Mahaparinirvana Sutra in the Mahayana has a version of the text, which is quite long and describes, the Buddha tells many stories about his leaving the world is actually not really leaving the world. And he gives many stories. He gives how it's like one beautiful analogy was like, he says it's like the sun and the moon when on a cloudy day, or very cloudy day, and you can't see the sun and moon. So those people who are not very learned, the kind of foolish people say the sun and moon is gone. The sun and moon is not there anymore. But in actuality, the sun and moon is still there. So he says, I'm just like that. The Tathagata is just like that. It seems like I'm going to leave, but in reality, I'm always there. So that's one of the basic teachings of the Nirvana Sutra. So he's entering Nirvana and leaving his body. He explains, actually, I'm just doing this as a teaching, to teach living beings, but he's always there. And so that's what we did for the last 10 days at the Siddhanta Buddhas, and I thought it was extremely meaningful. So we still have a little bit of time. I don't know if people have any questions about the sutra text or things in general. We can answer. Oh, yes?
So, you were using that term Wu?
Wu? Yeah.
No?
No, yeah, nothing.
I know that term shows up a lot of the Tao Te Ching.
Mm-hmm.
But in like optimal Wu, and then also like Wei, like non-doing.
Wu Wei, yeah, non-doing.
So I was curious if there's a connection of like non-doing.
What?
Because I mean, I know that Chen is influenced.
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a bit of that concept of Wu Wei in the Taoist tradition, I would say, has really also come into the Buddhist world as well. Is one of those places there was kind of a synergy between the Dharma and Taoism, because I don't know if you have much of an understanding of that concept of Wu Wei. Wu Wei.
If you could explain it without.
Yeah. 要解释那个无为的这个道理吗？道德经，他有问这个无为无。Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. 道德经。Yeah. So 无为跟道德经跟佛法是有什么差别，或者是什么方式，或者是什么关系？ However, my first thought about that would be the concept of non-doing in Taoism. On the surface, seems a little bit strange. When we come to it, it's like especially with a Western mind where we're always going out and doing stuff as our kind of way of saving the world. We do stuff, right? But in the Taoism, it says non-doing. Does that mean that you just do nothing? Is that what it's saying? I don't think actually that's the meaning behind it. It's not to say you do nothing, but rather you do things, but you don't really do them with a kind of attachment. You don't do them with a kind of a selfish motivation. You don't have a self there doing it. So you become effortless. If you see, I think, true masters of any craft or any art, they do their art without a self. You know what I mean? It's like great artists aren't prideful. They don't try to say, look at me, I'm great. This is my great artwork. They're super humble. They just do it for the art. They just do it for whatever skill they're mastering. That's Wu. And so if you apply that into the Dharma, if we cultivate, that's the kind of heart we want to cultivate. When we're meditating, we're not trying to become a great meditator. We're living the monastic life, we're not trying to become a great monk, quote unquote. If we try to become a great monk, we're in big trouble. We'll probably fall as quickly as we become great. And so over time, ideally, we become more and more empty. We become more and more Wu. We become more and more humble. We become more and more able to not need to be recognized, not need to be the center of things, and just let things go and flow naturally. We still act. We still do things in the world, but we do it in a complete accordance with the Tao. That's the Taoist idea. We do it in accordance with the Tao. In Buddhism, we do it in accordance with the awakened nature. We do things in accordance with the way things actually are. So there's a lot of, I would say, resonance there. And that's why I would say in the Chan school, especially the Zen school of Buddhism, that concept really came in very deep into the Dharma. And I think a lot of Taoists, because they had practiced that beforehand, were actually able to immediately touch Buddhism and have some kind of awakening, because they had that deep practice of this unattached skill in working and doing things in the world. And when we went to met the Dharma, they could apply that and wake up. Yeah. 还有讲什么？
按照那个唯识来讲，无为一种无为法就寂灭的意思，然后有为法它又分成两种，一种是显现出来的，一种是埋藏在心内的。可是按照佛法来讲，要超过这个相对的法，因为《道德经》我真的不太深入，所以不敢讲。我只能以这个两方面跟你报告一下。唯识里面的无为是
心法，无为心法。
无为法是寂灭入涅槃是全部没有的。
Okay, so this is not exactly the same concept in Taoism, but it's the same word in Buddhism. It's called Wu Wei, is the unconditioned. And so in a particular school of Buddhism called the Yogacara, it actually, you almost think of it as like a Buddhist psychology. It basically analyzes the mind, and it analyzes the mental phenomena or the phenomena of the world into those that are conditioned and those that are unconditioned. And certain things are unconditioned, like nirvana or space is unconditioned. And there's other things that are conditioned. And there are certain things that are conditioned that we can physically see, and those things that we cannot see. So this is one way of analyzing the mind that we can go very deep into. I don't think there's time to do that right now, but if people are interested, we can talk about that some other time. Yeah. Okay. If you would like to hear the story, then you should tell the story. We have this quick story. 讲故事。
在讲那个优婆离尊者前，先讲另外一个小故事，因为我们很难得那边共同聚会在一起，所以各位都是非常重要的。你看那个飞机要少个螺丝的话，它就从天上掉下来。
飞机有个螺丝，
少一个螺丝
就掉下。Oh, okay. So everyone here together is a very, you could say, a very rare chance for all of us here to come here together and study the Dharma. I'm not quite sure how this analogy applies, if people can think about it. He says that it's like a plane. If a plane tries to fly and is just missing one screw, it will fall from the sky. So I don't know, maybe that applies to us. Maybe if one of us were missing, we'd all collapse. I don't know.
所以很难得大家共聚在一起，我们要各守本分，做好自己本身的事，不要跟我以前一样，看了这个人比我好会嫉妒，会嗔恨。讲这个嗔恨，就讲个小故事给各位听。
Okay, so because we're all here together, we all have our own piece of the puzzle, you could say, our own role to play in this bigger group. And so we should all do what we can do as a group and not do like what I used to do, having a kind of some jealousy, getting angry with others, etc. Rather, we want to not do that. So here I want to tell a small story on anger.
嗔恨应要用慈悲心来对待它。在明初的时候，中国明初的时候，它还有个佃农的制度，也就是地主有地，我没有地，我去帮你种田。
So in China, there's a story that came from the Ming Dynasty, I think the early Ming Dynasty, and at that time they had this kind of, you can say maybe maybe somewhat of a feudal system, where basically if I have land, but I say I can't cultivate all the land, then I would lease it out to other people, and they'd work the land for me.
那一年刚好碰到干旱，跟现在天气一样，天气不下雨，所以根本就没有收成。
So during that time, there was a severe drought, kind of like now. There's no rain, and so there was no harvest. There was no harvest at that time.
然后这个种田的就求那个地主，能不能今年交税交少一点？还是可以不要交，因为我真的没有收成，连吃饭都吃不下去了。
So the farmer then went to the landlord and requested, "Can I please not pay taxes this year, or maybe less taxes this year? Because right now there's no harvest and we barely have enough food to eat. We don't have enough food to eat."
因为那个地主不是佛教徒，所以不答应。
Because the landlord wasn't Buddhist, he did not agree to this.
然后他烦恼了，生病了，快要死了。
So this farmer got extremely afflicted and unhappy, and he almost was about to die.
他心里面就充满了嗔恨。
So in his heart, he was extremely angry.
跟他儿子怎么说？他说：“我死了以后，你把我的棺材后面挖个洞。”
So he said, "What?" He told his kid, "I'm about to die." Told his son, "But when I die, you take my coffin and you cut a hole in the back of the coffin before you bury me."
他儿子就问他：“你干嘛要挖个洞啊？”
Yes, Dad. Why do you want to cut a hole in the back of your coffin?
他说：“我太恨那个地主了，我死后要变一条蛇去咬他。”
He says, "I hate that landlord. After I die, I'm going to become a snake, and I'm going to go and bite that landlord."
这时候他儿子越想越不对，就去找了个地主跟他讲，把这情形全部跟地主讲。地主一想，虽然他没有学佛法，可是也想，以后不能这样子啊。
So his son thought, "Oh, this is really bad," and so he went to said, "Okay, what do I do?" So he went to talk to the landlord, and he explained the situation to his landlord, and the landlord thought, "Okay, I can't. This isn't a really good situation. Although I don't. Although he doesn't want to. But he said, well, I don't want this to happen."
就答应了他，带了韭菜来跟他和解。
So he came to see this farmer with some food and things, and kind of just to make peace.
那个农人一看地主来了，又答应他，心情就好了一半，病就好了。
So this farmer saw the landlord, and they had a kind of a reconciliation. So the farmer became happy again, and his sickness went away.
然后吃啊喝啊，就觉得心里面很闷，有东西要想要吐。
So he was drinking, and they were eating, and they were very happy. But in his chest, he felt this kind of pressure, and he wanted to kind of throw up.
结果真的吐出一条蛇来。
So actually, when he threw up, he actually threw up a snake.
这是真实故事。
This is a real story.
所以我们对任何事、对任何人，不要有嗔恨心，要以慈悲心对待。
So for anybody, if we don't want to have anger, we want to have a compassionate heart, to treat others with a compassionate heart.
讲那个平等，佛在世的时候讲了优婆离尊者，
So we tell the story about equanimity. This is a venerable Upali.
他出生是首陀罗族，就是也是最下贱一种这个族类。
So he was actually born into the untouchable caste. People know the Indian caste system, right? That's the lowest caste.
没有受教育的资格，
So he couldn't even receive an education.
只能去做一些奴隶啊，做一些工这样子，种田。
He can only do very, very menial labor.
他母亲比较有智慧，就看他又那么瘦那么小，叫他学个手艺，学了理发。
So his mother saw him so small and so little that maybe he can learn some skill, and so he taught us 剪头发. Yeah, so taught him to be a barber. So became a barber.
剪头发也算一种奴隶啊，他就到处拜托，之后请到王宫去帮忙那个王子剪头发。
So he became like a servant. He went all over to help serve as a hairdresser. Not hairdresser, a barber.
因为他很认真，所以功夫就越来越好。
He was a really hard worker, so bit by bit his skill in cutting hair improved.
大概在他20岁的时候，那时候佛陀成佛第3年，佛陀要去那边理发，他帮佛陀理发。
So when he was about 20 years old, the Buddha had already realized enlightenment for 3 years, and he came to a place where Venerable Upali was, and Venerable Upali actually helped the Buddha cut his hair.
既紧张又害怕。
He was really scared and nervous.
说佛32相，要给他头发剪不好的话，这样就惨了。
He says that Buddha had the 32 hallmarks of a great man. He said if I cut his hair wrong, it'd be no good.
紧张睡不着觉，他的母亲很有智慧，他没关系，你不要紧张，第2天我陪你去。
So he was really nervous. So the day before he couldn't go to sleep, and so his mom had a lot of wisdom. Said, "Don't worry, I'll accompany you to see the Buddha."
第2天就去了，给佛陀理发，当时很小心、很注意、很谨慎的。
So he went to help cut the Buddha's hair, and he was very, very meticulous and careful in his cutting his hair.
他的理了一下，他母亲就跪在佛陀面前，问佛陀啊，他跟剃发手艺到底怎么样啊？
And so the mother kneeled when he was cutting our Buddha's hair. The mother kneeled before the Buddha and asked, "So how is he cutting? How is he cutting his hair? Is he doing a good job?"
佛陀这时候注意到他，就跟他讲，好像身体太硬了，太弯了。
So he said, "It seems like his body is too hard and too bent over, too bent over."
然后听佛陀这一讲，因为他很恭敬佛陀，说弯了腰再剪嘛，一听他直起来讲，这时候他就进入了初禅。
So he was very because he was very sincere and respectful. That's why he was bending over to out of respect when he's cutting the Buddha's hair. But then, so when he stood up straight, he actually entered the first dhyana of a state of you could say a very profound state of concentration.
过了一下，他母亲又跪下来问佛陀啊，优婆离现在到底头发帮你剃得怎么样？
So this second time, his mother asked the Buddha, "How is he cutting your hair?"
佛陀注意了一下，就跟他说，好像现在身体又太直了。
So maybe his body is too straight now.
优婆离给他佛陀这么一说，就不敢妄想懈怠，就一心一意。这时候他进入第2禅。
So this time, the Venerable Upali wasn't heard this and basically thought, I need to not have any false thinking and not do anything kind of wrong in my mind. So he actually entered the second dhyana.
过了一下，母亲又问佛陀，就说：“现在入息太粗了，就呼吸。”
Oh, he said. So his mother asked again, and he said, "Well, his breathing is too coarse."
优婆离这时候一听，就想到不要入息，把心力就集中在入息方面。据说这时候他已经进入到第3禅。
So then he really focused on his breath and entered the third dhyana.
然后过了一下，他母亲又问他：“现在到底怎么样？”佛陀就回答他：“那粗细又太粗了， 又呼气的时候，这个声音太粗了。
So then the mother asked again, and the Buddha said, well, when he was exhaling, it's still a little bit too coarse.
优婆离尊者这时候竟然一念不生，忘记了手中的刀。据说他这时候已经进入了第四禅。
So at this point, Upali heard that and entered as you can probably guess, the fourth dhyana.
这时候佛陀赶快跟身边的比丘说：“你们过来一个人，赶快把他剃刀拿下来。他现在已经没有想，已经没有思想了，已经进入第三禅，帮他扶摇，不要让他跌倒。”
So then the Buddha told the other monks, you need to take the knife away from him because he's already entered the fourth dhyana and make sure he doesn't fall over.
这理个头发就可以进入四禅天。
So just cutting the Buddha's hair, he was able to enter the fourth dhyana.
重点在后面，当时那个7个王子要出家，包括提拔、阿难、阿拉律等均在内，他们要出家。等他们正式剃度完，那时候优婆离已经先他们出家了。等他们要出家的时候，那个王子要出家的时候，佛陀叫他们先顶礼优婆离尊者。
But the main point I want to get to was that Venerable Upali actually decided to become a monk, and he left home. And all these 7, you could say, royal family, 7 members of the royal family, were also planning to become a monk, who wanted to leave home with the Buddha. And the Buddha told them, before they could leave home, they had to bow before Venerable Upali.
这是佛陀会制造一个平等的社会，让大家觉得没有种族的差别，没有这个贵贱的差别。贵为王子，你要先顶礼你的师兄，也就是优婆离尊者。
So the Buddha wanted to create a system where everybody was equal. There was no up and down. There was no distinction by race or caste. And so before these royal members of the family could become monastics, they had to go and pay their respects to their senior Dharma brother, who was used to be part of the very low caste.
问题是他是比他们几位提早7天前出家而已。
So, but the thing was that Venerable Upali only left home 7 days before this group of royal members of the family.
当年结下安居的时候，优婆离尊者就开悟了。
So 就是下一个。
不是，就同年结下安居的时候。
So that same year during the Vasa, during the rains retreat, Venerable Upali actually awoke and realized the way.
他我们10大尊者里面持戒第一。
So among the Buddha's disciples, he was considered the foremost in maintaining the precepts.
9点
钟 OK 好吧。
阿弥陀佛。
Okay, so that's the story of Venerable Upali. Yeah, it's a very amazing story. In the Buddhist, if you look at the Buddha's monastic structure, it's really interesting because we often study the Buddha Dharma. This is the Dharma, but the Buddha was also a very wise and skillful in actually setting up an organization. You don't really think of the Buddha as a organizer or a community leader, but if you imagine, he has thousands of people following him. So he actually created a society almost of how to maintain all these people from fighting with each other, getting along with one another, keeping them on the path. How do they relate with their society? And so he created a system for all these people to live together. And one of them that's really important was what Venerable Jing Wu just talked about, was that he set up a system for the monastics so that the monastics support one another in our practice, and there's a sense of order that we pay respect to one another, not based on our family status or our history, all those things. It's actually just by our life as monastics. And so also, for instance, he would really encourage, I think people who've taken the Bodhisattva precepts know that people aren't supposed to say, make offerings to the Sangha in a discriminatory fashion. You don't say, oh, I think this monk or this nun is particularly accomplished in his practice or her practice, so therefore I want to give special offerings to them. I might give them some special food or some kind of special thing. That would be considered giving offerings just in a discriminating fashion. Rather, you want to make an offering to the entire monastic community. And so that's the spirit that the Buddha laid out, was that by doing that, one really is making a true offering. without discrimination, and that it has the greatest blessings. We just had Ulumbana. I think that teaching was probably explained in last Saturday, because that was Ulumbana. And the merit of that act of giving during Ulumbana comes because you're making an offering to the assembled Sangha. It's not just one person. And so that's the idea. So the Buddha not just spoke Dharma about it, but he laid out an entire system for the monastic community, and also how the lay people relate to that, for that principle to be embodied and materialized in the modern times, in the world itself. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so other than that, any other things? Yes?
So just a quick update. When Wu Fa Sư mentioned the Wu Wei, the
Wu Wei.
non-doing,
Yeah.
he has one line, he didn't translate. He mentioned that the non-doing is the opposite to the doing. So this kind of mindset or the duality from the Buddhist perspective is doing to breakthrough.
Okay. So what Alan was saying was, one line I didn't translate was that you talk about non-doing is creates the duality of non-doing and doing, and so even within the Dharma, you try to break through that duality. Yeah. Okay. If there's nothing else, we have these couple of announcements. Tomorrow we will begin. Actually, tonight we're going to purify the boundaries for the Earth Store session that's starting next week at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. So tomorrow we're going to have a celebration for Earth Store Bodhisattva, tomorrow Sunday. So people want to go up to the City of 10,000 Buddhas. There may be carpools. I'm sure some people will probably going up from this community. And there'll be a day of reciting the Earth Store Sutra. And that will follow by an entire week of reciting the Earth Store Sutra. So that's happening. The school year is officially started for the university, the RBU, up at the St. Thousand Buddhas. And here in Berkeley, the classes are going to start in September. So the week after, not this week, but the following week, all the classes will start up again, which means Marty's class on the Sixth Patriarch Sutra. We have a new translation, a lot of hard work. We talked about translation tonight. Marty with Reverend Heng Sure and others worked really hard on creating a new translation because it was pushed because of the Chinese government. The Chinese government wanted to publish a translation of the Sixth Patriarch, and so they asked the RBA to help with that. So that's why that was created, and we have that translation just recently published, and that'll be the text for the class. So if people are going to want to study the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, come on Friday, this first week of September, right? September 7th? 5th? September 5th. And so that's the first lecture of the series, so you don't want to miss the very first lecture. Other than that, we'll also have Buddhism for the Modern Mind will be beginning. We'll also have a class introducing some of the basics of Buddhism on, I believe, September 2nd on Thursdays. So it'll be a full schedule here again once the school year starts. So I don't know if I'm leaving anything else out. Anything? Okay. So we can do the transference of merit. It's on the back of your sheet called Dedication of Merit. Did everybody find it? It's on the back of the sheet? Okay. So the way you do this is you make a wish in your heart, whatever thing you want to dedicate the merit to. As one. this boundless light, break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turned into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. So we can all stand and bow to the Buddhas. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master.